This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Sudan security forces fire tear gas at protesters in the capital, Khartoum. ECOWAS considers imposing more sanctions on Mali if no progress is made on elections. And the DRC's president says the presence of Ugandan troops will be temporary. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. The ship Ever Given successfully crosses the Suez Canal. And the Central Bank of Libya announces a plan to end years of division between the Eastern and Western banks. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, in our top story, protests continue in Sudan as demonstrators relentlessly reject military rule in the country. There have been no reports of casualties. However, activists say at least 44 people have been killed and hundreds injured since protests began in October. These street marches were initiated following a military takeover and a subsequent deal that led to the reinstatement of Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. The takeover interrupted a planned transition to democratic rule over 2 years after former leader Omar al-Bashir was deposed. Hamdok returned to power last month under a deal to implement an independent technocratic cabinet appointed under military oversight. However, pro-democracy movements have discarded the deal, calling for power to be handed over to a civilian government to lead the transition process.
There is no doubt that we are in a deep crisis, and as I said 3 days ago in the Security Council, the crisis has not yet ended. And I think that the dialogues that are taking place now with various political forces about political declarations or a political map, these dialogues are very important, but so far it has not led to any result.
In my estimation, the revolution will be successive and will be burning until its goals are achieved. And every matter the street ignites and its movement increases, it confirms that the street will not be silenced except with a civilian government.
Now, the head of the United Nations mission in Sudan, Volker Perthes, has held a meeting with the families of those killed in the December demonstrations. Perthes said it was necessary for the country to have a civilian government with a unified army.
Unifying the army and unifying the military force is a very important issue. And I said earlier in the first or second press conference in Khartoum that I said a country with 4, 5, 6 armies will not be stable. And therefore, we have experts at the United Nations who offered our assistance to the military institutions and peace partners in this field.
Well, let's go live now to Khartoum for the latest on this story. We're joined by CGTN's Naba Mohuddin in Khartoum. Naba, Prime Minister Hamdok has promised to appoint a civilian government, but of course protests continue. Tell us why people are still determined to gather on the streets.
Thank you, Lindy. The protesters are still rallying in the street because they refuse the power sharing agreement and they refuse the recent political deal signed with the military. They refuse the military to be in the political scene and any partnership with the military. So whether if Hamdok appointed a civilian-led government, people, they don't want Hamdok. The protesters and pro-democracy groups, they don't want Hamdok or the military to be in the political scene. And I think they will still rally till they see the military out of the political scene.
And of course, the other concern is that we've seen that protesters have faced aggression from security forces. They've seen tear gas and many, or rather some, have even died in these protests. Is there any sense that they might back down just for the safety of their own lives, really?
Actually, observers observers think the protest will continue till next year, and it will every move from the military or the prime minister, it will be faced by protest and new protest. So we may see a new unrest in the country next year, and I think the protesters will keep rallying and will keep resisting this power sharing agreement and the military to be in power next year, and maybe till elections, if this power sharing will be till next year, if it's nothing changed and resolve this power sharing agreement.
So they won't give up until their demands are met. Thank you so much, Naba Mohuddin, joining us there from Khartoum. Let's go to South Africa now, where the country's president has tested positive for COVID-19. Cyril Ramaphosa is self-isolating in Cape Town, where doctors are treating him for mild symptoms. He's delegated all responsibilities to Deputy President David Mabuza for the next week. Ramaphosa is fully vaccinated and was tested repeatedly during a recent visit to 4 West African countries. Officials have not said whether he is infected with the Omicron variant, which was first detected in Southern Africa last month. But Ramaphosa said his own infection is a warning to all citizens of the importance of getting vaccinated and being careful. Angela Coppola brings us more.
President Ramaphosa has just returned from a series of state visits to 4 West African states, where he and his delegation were tested at each stage of the trip and on their return to South Africa. At the moment, it's not clear whether Ramaphosa contracted the new variant or not. His isolation and delegation of responsibilities to his deputy comes in the same week that the National COVID Command Council will meet to discuss the latest scientific data and suggest a course of action to the country's leader. In this case, it's going to be Deputy President David Mabuza. Ramaphosa also consults widely with the ANC partners and business and religious leaders before making an address to the nation. Normally, Ramaphosa speaks to the nation within a day or two of the consultations and that scientific meeting. At the moment, it's unclear whether Mabuza will follow that same process or not. In a statement from the presidency, Ramaphosa says his own infection serves, as he put it, as a caution to all people in the country to be vaccinated and to remain vigilant against exposure. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Nigeria may ban flights from Argentina, Britain, Canada and Saudi Arabia from this week in retaliation for being added to those countries' red lists over the detection of the Omicron variant. In recorded comments shared with journalists on Sunday, Nigeria's aviation minister Hadi Sirika said he had recommended that the 4 countries be placed on a COVID-19 red list, which would entail a ban on flights. CGTN's Deji Badimosi has more on that story.
The aviation minister's comment came in a leaked audio that has received wide support across the country. Majority of Nigerians are not happy with the so-called red list status of the country. Now, the Presidential Steering Committee on the COVID-19 pandemic, which has the responsibility for placing countries on Nigeria's COVID-19 red list, has not yet spoken about the issue. It's expected to meet this week, and there could be a pronouncement on the subject after that meeting. But Nigeria's Minister of Health, who is also a member of the committee, has said any decision the government eventually takes on the matter will not be a tit-for-tat measure, but literally to protect the interest of the country. Now, the United Kingdom, one of the countries to place Nigeria on its COVID-19 red list, has said it will not reverse its travel ban over the threat of reciprocity. It says the measures it took are only temporary to prevent the spread of the Omicron variant and would be reviewed at regular intervals. So everyone is now waiting to get a final word on the issue from the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19. Deji Badimosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has renewed its commitment to tackling the many challenges facing the region, from insecurity to political instability and economic challenges compounded by the coronavirus pandemic. Resolutions were reached at the end of the 60th ordinary session of Heads of States and Governments Summit in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam with more.
A meeting to end a year the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, describes as one of its most chaotic, characterized by security threats from bandits and insurgent groups ISIS and Boko Haram. That and political upheavals that led to military coups and the onward suspension of two of its members, Mali and Gambia.
All of these challenges require our collective action to work in concert with each other to pragmatically address and provide our people better prospects in life. Today's realities remind us of the need to continue to forge stronger solidarity in order to address the new challenges.
And the sub-region's biggest new challenge has been the mutating coronavirus pandemic and the threats of a new wave. What's worse, vaccines are not readily available. So just 2% of the region's population has been fully vaccinated. So leaders here are looking within for alternatives.
The new variant Omicron has already been found in 3 member states and has led to unfortunate impositions of travel bans by some countries, which are unjustified and unacceptable. Meanwhile, the availability of vaccines continues to remain a problem. We must continue to pursue national and regional efforts to fight COVID-19 and move rapidly into the domestic production of vaccines.
At the end of a meeting, leaders rose with a commitment to boost support of joint border operations in combating terrorism. They also adopted the regional body's Vision 2050 to create a peaceful, prosperous and all-inclusive community. In the meantime, the leaders want sanctions imposed on Guinea and Mali backed by the international community. It seeks a clear-cut transition process and timelines for both countries. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, let's go to the Democratic Republic of Congo now. President Felix Tshisekedi says the presence of Ugandan troops in the country will only be for a limited period. Uganda and Congo launched a joint operation this month to fight the Allied Democratic Forces, an armed group collaborating with the Islamic State. However, not much information has been disclosed about the scope of the operation and its expected duration. Well, so far, at least 1,700 Ugandan soldiers have crossed into eastern Uganda. Uganda's defense ministry says its troops will stay as long as needed to fight off and defeat the ADF.
Our two countries recently agreed to join forces in order to operate together against this common enemy. Our parliament, fully informed, will ensure that the presence of Ugandan troops in our soil is limited to the time strictly necessary for this operation.
You are watching Africa Live. Time now for a short break. Still ahead, the EU says it's discussing the possibility of more sanctions on Russia with the UK and the US. And a call for urgent action to avert rising hunger in several African countries. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. in the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
No war, no one again he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
The European Union says it's discussing with the US and the UK the possibility of more sanctions on Russia. The bloc's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, made the statement ahead of a meeting of European foreign ministers. Borrell said the EU wanted to send a clear signal to Russia that, quote, any aggression against Ukraine will have a high cost. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has arrived in the United Arab Emirates. He's met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed. Bennett's the first ever Israeli premier to pay an official visit to the Persian Gulf state. The trip comes amid rising tensions between Israel and Iran and talks in Vienna to save a nuclear deal which the US backed out of in 2018. The number of people displaced by ongoing drought and famine in Somalia is increasing every day, with new arrivals in the main cities seeking humanitarian assistance. Humanitarian agencies say the situation could escalate if expected seasonal rains do not begin in the next few weeks. Mohammed Kair has the details from an internally displaced people's camp outside the capital, Mogadishu.
Displaced camp outskirts of Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. It's home to hundreds of people affected by the ongoing drought in the country. They were farmers and livestock keepers who lost their livelihoods. Halima Hassan, a single mother of 6 children, just arrived in the camp a week ago from the agricultural town of Toro Toro in Lower Shabelle region. She lost her cattle to the drought and could not farm due to the delayed rainy season.
I lost my livestock. Also, no farming, no water, and conflict, nowhere to run to. That is why I came here. I've been here with his family for the past 5 days.
The Somali government and humanitarian agencies are scaling up their efforts to reach out to displaced families like Halima, but that is not enough. There is still a scarcity of food and water for the new arrivals.
As we are speaking now, I don't have anything. No shelter, farm or livestock, food or water. I'm a burden to this family. I eat the little they have.
The Somali government declared a state of humanitarian emergency late last month as drought ravaged 80% of the country. Since then, local initiatives have been mobilized to reach out to hard-hit areas as aid agencies appeal for more funding. Mohammed Kahir, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Now, the United Nations has warned of a looming food security crisis in Sudan. In a recently released report, the global body said 14 million out of a population of 47 million people will require food aid in the coming year. The statistics reflect an increase of 800,000 compared to this year. Now, this comes at a time when the country is facing a political and economic crisis presented by a military takeover 2 months ago. Analysts in the country, however, maintain that Sudan is capable of producing its own food and importing.
It is true that the United Nations report confirmed that 30% of the Sudanese people will need food in 2022. But we can confirm that there will be no famine in Sudan, given that Sudan possesses 80 million hectares arable and less than 30% of it is exploited.
Well, between an influx of displaced people and poor harvests, hunger also threatens northern Burkina Faso. And as CGTN's Wanja Mungai reports, conflict in the country is worsening the situation.
1 in 4 children under the age of 5, like 9-month-old Sakinatu Amadou, suffered from stunted growth. This is due to malnutrition, among other things.
Her mother died. I took the child to the medical center. After the consultation, the child was found to be ill.
Burkina Faso derives 80% of its resources from agriculture, but since 2015, the country has been caught up in a spiral of violence. The unrest has been attributed to armed jihadist groups affiliated to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State organization. The attacks are increasingly frequent and mostly concentrated in the north and east of the country, like in Dori in Seno province.
Now nobody wants to come to Dori. Nobody. Once in Ouagadougou, I spoke to a young man who told me, even if you pay me $1,800, I won't come to Dori.
Attacks have left around 2,000 people dead and 1.4 million displaced.
This year, we have received 144 displaced pupils from areas with a very high security risk. When they came here, they were traumatized children. Parents, when they come to us with their children, you can see an indescribable sadness. Once we welcome the children and they see that at lunchtime they have a meal that they share with other pupils, it facilitates integration.
United Nations agencies are now warning that the number of food insecure people in West and Central Africa has risen to a record high of 28 million people. And if nothing is done to bring these numbers down, the trend will continue to go up. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
The latest now on the tornadoes that have wreaked havoc in the United States. At least 100 people are feared dead so far. According to the Kentucky governor, the tornadoes are the worst in U.S. history. Here's CGTN's Dan Williams with more.
Well, officials are quick to point out that this, as far as they're concerned, it still is a search and rescue operation. And we did see last night sniffer dogs, canine units going house to house trying to see if they could find any survivors. But even the Kentucky governor, Andy Beshear, says that this it would be a miracle if they were to find any further survivors, and but remain hopeful that that could still be the case. A bit of an update on the candle factory here in Mayfield. Remember, there were reports of some 60 people missing. That figure has now been revised down to 8, with 8 confirmed deaths from that factory. So that at least is some good news from that. But the Kentucky death toll alone, that already stands at least 80 dead here. There's some 14 deaths from other states, and the governor very quick to say that the death toll is likely to be above 100 people. But going back to your question, the key element here is that it is also a recovery process underway. We're seeing yesterday emergency units here, FEMA, the emergency agency here, cleaning up debris, moving all of this. You can still see behind me the after effects of the tornadoes from Friday night. Still a huge amount to do, but that cleanup operation is still also very much underway as well.
Well, let's return now to our coverage of key developments at the ECOWAS summit in Nigeria. The head of Mali's military-dominated government has promised to provide the West African regional bloc with an election timetable by next month. Now, this comes after ECOWAS stated it would consider imposing additional economic sanctions on Mali if no concrete progress was made to prepare for fresh elections, this following a coup in August 2020. Let's bring you some analysis on this. We are now joined by Achike Chude, an African affairs analyst. Achike, thank you so much for your time. So indeed, ECOWAS considering imposing more sanctions on Mali. Do you get the sense that this will work? I mean, is this the kind of pressure that the military junta will respond to, considering that there have been sanctions applied before?
I think even the ECOWAS is not exactly sure how effective their sanction on Mali would be. They are not exactly sure how effective it is going to be, how far the sanctions will go in changing the mindset of the junta in Mali. I think ECOWAS finds itself in a very difficult situation where they cannot impose the kind of punitive sanction that would tell on the members of the military junta. And of course, you know that the issue of sanctions have been one that has been debated over the years, that when sanctions are imposed, it is essentially the citizens of the country against whom the sanctions have been imposed that suffer, that bear the brunt. The political leadership in most instances are isolated from the effects of the junta because they have the best of what the country has to offer. It's at their beck and call. So I do not see, unless these sanctions can be targeted at the personal assets of the junta members, but how much of these assets do they have within Mali and outside of Mali, for instance? It is only when that is brought to bear, if such assets exist, that you can say, yes, it is actually biting the junta members. But if it's a sanction against Mali itself as a country, I do not see the military junta responding to the effects of the sanctions. In the first place, most of them are not exactly interested in what happens generally as a whole in Mali. That is my take. So ECOWAS is somehow limited, is incapacitated. So I think that is my take. Yeah.
The junta, on its part, is saying that they will be able to present an election timetable by next month, but they've also signaled a suggestion around election delays over questions of insecurity. In your view, can elections actually go ahead under these current circumstances?
Well, the issue, I think the junta is just trying to be clever by half. Obviously, they have toyed with the ideas of running this timetable on their own without any input from ECOWAS. They want to remain in government for as long as possible. Don't forget that when the coup was first undertaken in Mali, they had mapped out a 3-year program. Of return to civilian rule, which the ECOWAS outrightly rejected. Now the issue of insecurity is the reason, basis for that. But we've had elections even in violent-prone areas. We've had elections in Nigeria, in the far north of the country where Boko Haram has been active. We've had elections at the heartland of insurrection in Borno State. We've had elections in Mali, even before the military intervention in governance, when the former president was there. Elections were held under conditions of insecurity. So I do not think that the problem of insecurity is enough for them to use that as a basis not to have elections when elections should be conducted. I think it is, look, what they did was a power grab, and what they are trying to do is to consolidate for as long as possible on the power that they have taken over in Mali. So insecurity is just an excuse that they have, that they feel might be a basis to convince ECOWAS that the elections will not hold now. ECOWAS, of course, has turned it down. If by December 27th they do not see any meaningful movement towards elections, then they are talking about imposing the sanctions. But like I said, how effective the sanctions will be is another problem. So it's a dilemma, I believe, for the ECOWAS.
Indeed, a complex dilemma. Thank you so much, Achike Chude, joining us there live from Lagos. You are watching Africa Live. Your business news up next with Uche.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. The ship Ever Given successfully crosses the Suez Canal. And the Central Bank of Libya announces a plan to end years of division between the Eastern and Western banks.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Egypt, where the ship that blocked the Suez Canal for 6 days in March has successfully crossed the channel. Ever Given returned to the same channel after the Suez Canal Authority raised its preparedness status for such ship crosses. Well, here's CGTN's Adel El Maroui with more.
Egypt is holding its breath as one of the biggest container ships in the world passes through its Suez Canal. The Ever Given is no ordinary ship. The last time the container ship was passing through the Suez Canal towards Europe, it choked global supply chain. The Ever Given and all the fleet moving north from the Red Sea stopped navigation as the Suez Canal Authority increased its preparedness level. This comes not because of the ship. Authorities say it's because Egypt goes through a wave of extreme weather conditions. During the past few days, the country experienced high wind speed and intense sand movement that partially blocked visibility. The Suez Canal does not want to risk the flow of navigation, which sees over 100 ships crossing daily. On Sunday morning, the Ever Given reached the Great Bitter Lake, successfully passing through the southern bottleneck of the Suez Canal, where it got grounded for 6 days back in March. Expansions Egypt made to the Suez Canal in 2015 increased the capacity of the essential maritime trade route. After the March grounding, Egypt introduced further expansions. This is the second time the Ever Given passes through the Suez Canal after it got refloated earlier this year. Adel Maharoui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Libya's central bank has announced a plan to end years of division between eastern and western banks of Libya. The governor of the Central Bank of Libya, Al-Siddiq Al-Kabir, agreed on a detailed plan to launch the process of uniting the central bank. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
It's an odd situation where one country has two central banks. Since 2014, war-torn Libya has had one central bank in the capital Tripoli in the west and another in Benghazi in the rival east. Unifying both central banks ahead of the presidential and parliamentary elections end of December is a complicated process, as the political differences between both sides led to the Tripoli government cutting revenue to the east.
This meant people were not able to deposit or withdraw their money in banks in the east, which has affected their lives and damaged the Libyan economy. Despite calls to release the funds to people in the east, it has been rejected by the central bank governor Al-Siddiq Al-Kabir in Tripoli. This is an unprecedented situation in any country. All these political maneuvers have affected living conditions for Libyans.
International accounting firm Deloitte was brought in to review the books, and it submitted a roadmap to merge the banks. No details have been released yet, but experts believe stabilizing the financial sector would hugely benefit a heavily indebted nation.
90 to 95% of Libya's income comes from oil. Libya exports 1.25 million barrels a day, with plans to reach 2 million barrels. Libya has the largest oil reserves in Africa at 40 billion barrels, followed by Nigeria. Libya has abundant natural resources, with a small population of only 7 million people who should have been living in luxury, if not for the political infighting and armed militias everywhere.
Most Libyans now are looking forward to elections, hoping it would finally end the political strife and build an economy that has the potential to be the richest in the region. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's head to Tanzania now, where motorists are paying more for fuel this month following the continued upward review of prices by the country's energy regulator. Now, the prices have hit a record high even after the recent interventions by the Energy Ministry to strike off certain charges and levies that were considered a burden to consumers. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lukando with more.
Fuel prices in Tanzania have been steadily rising since the beginning of the year. The cost of a litre of petrol has gone up from under 80 US cents in January to the current retail cost of about $1.10, an almost 40% increase. Motorists in the country say they are feeling the pinch.
I was actually thinking of getting a bigger car right now, but with the fuel prices shooting up, I think I'm having second thoughts.
I am worried that the rise in fuel prices might also affect other commodities and that their prices may also start to shoot up.
The government has already scrapped 8 out of around 15 fuel-related levies in a bid to lower prices, but the move appears to have done little to change the situation. President Samia Suluhu Hassan is asking officials in her government to do more.
We've been instructed as a government and as a ministry to sit down with our colleagues to look into the entire fuel business. We are to look into what is causing a rise in prices and what we can do in the country in terms of taxes, the running of things, as well as procedures in order to ease the situation for citizens.
According to the regulator, fuel prices in the country have been dictated by rising global crude oil prices, as well as the various local taxes, levies and charges, which make up over 40% of the total cost of fuel. The government hopes that with the National Petroleum Company now procuring fuel for retailers in the country, prices might begin to dip.
For many residents of Dar es Salaam, private vehicles are a preferred mode of transport. A continued rise in fuel prices might see many of them make the difficult decision of parking their cars at home.
Analysts argue that getting rid of all the fuel-related levies that are driving up prices could be challenging. Alternatively, exploiting the country's abundant natural gas might be a simple and more long-term solution.
Just investing in making sure that people start using gas instead of petrol and diesel in their cars. How do you do that? You just involve private sector. For example, as of now, we need not to use diesel in these BRT buses, the rapid bus transport system that we have in Dar es Salaam.
Recent government efforts to lower fuel prices might take a while to bear fruit. However, more action, the government believes, will ultimately ease the burden on citizens and begin to drive economic growth. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And in some company news, South Africa's biggest supermarket group, Shoprite, says that its upmarket grocery chain, Checkers, has entered into a joint venture agreement with its delivery partner, the RTT Group. Now, this is all part of a push to grow the e-commerce business. RTT Group's on-demand business will be transferred into a new company in which Shoprite Checkers will subscribe for 50% of the issued ordinary shares. Now, as part of the deal terms, Checkers 6060 will continue to use RTT On Demand as its delivery partner. Shoprite also says the joint venture will protect the learnings, technology and intellectual property created by the Checkers 6060 On Demand delivery service to date. It will also facilitate future innovation and development of the group's last-mile logistics. The deal is due to be finalized prior to Shoprite's June 2022 year-end. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, the country's state oil company recorded a $346 million trading surplus in June. That's after recovering from an over $90 million deficit the previous month. Presenting its latest monthly report, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation said expenditure for the same month fell 29.32%. Also, 47 pipeline points were vandalized. That's compared to 64 in May. President Muhammadu Buhari said in August that the NNPC had made a profit for the first time in its 44-year history, generating an income of $698 million after tax in 2020. Meanwhile, in Zimbabwe, the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange is aiming to become among the large equity markets in the Southern African region. That is according to investment managers who believe the year-old bourse is now finding its feet. Well, Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa recently launched the foreign currency denominated bourse. Farai Mwakutuya starts us off from Harare.
When new listings dried up on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange because it was no longer practical to raise capital in a depreciating local currency, government set up the US dollar-denominated Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, VFEX, to help businesses attract funding in hard currency. The proposition was put to the test with the initial public offering of gold mining house Caledonia Mining Corporation shares.
It was oversubscribed quite considerably. They were looking for between 4 and 5 million. The total offers amounted to just below 8 million. So quite clearly, as a vehicle to raise capital, it's looking like it's something that can work, and it definitely passed with flying colors on that first test.
More listings are in the pipeline as the one-year-old BAUS starts to gain traction.
We've got two others as well that are at an advanced stage to come to the market. And then we know also the government want to issue a bond as well onto the market, and then are working with their advisors, and it's at an advanced stage as well. Then in terms of trades, when we started, there was very few trades that were happening on the market. Now there's more and more trades happening. So we believe as we get more counters, more trades will happen. The market becomes more attractive, then you get more people coming in.
VFEX is seen as the first step towards the transformation of Victoria Falls into an offshore financial services hub, modeled along the lines of Dubai and Mauritius.
A raft of incentives, including exemption on capital gains tax, are being dangled before investors in order to attract more participants.
However, a few kinks still need to be ironed out if the exchange is to meet government's ambitions.
There's need for a more transparent settlement system that will give confidence to foreign investors to put their capital and be able to extract their capital once they've made their profits. I think issues around that need to be addressed. Those are very fundamental.
To date, 3 counters are listed on VFEX. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, Egypt has announced a plan to double its exports to African nations to $10 billion by 2025. We'll find out how at the top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Ruche. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, dogs go back to school at Nigeria's Canine Festival.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Social gatherings are returning to normal in Somalia after COVID restrictions were lifted. Now, this has led to hundreds of people in Mogadishu spending their weekends along the Indian Ocean beaches, leaving behind piles of plastic waste. A volunteer youth group now conducts weekly cleaning exercises to make the beach attractive again and remove the solid waste that threatens marine life. Mohammed Kair has the details from Mogadishu.
These young volunteers come here every weekend for cleaning. The exercise, which started 7 weeks ago, is already gaining momentum, and the organizers say they are committed.
We started the cleaning exercise with 6 people, but now there are more than 100. We are also joined by organized groups, which are 20 to 30 people, to take part in the beach cleaning program. And waste has been increasing every week because we have been discovering old trash piles.
Nim'o Abdul Qadir, who is part of the group, is a student at the Department of Environmental Science at Somali National University. She says there's a need for more awareness.
We are urging restaurant and hotel operators as well as residents living along the beach to stop dumping waste into the sea. The community also needs more awareness campaigns to reduce the amount of waste.
Local authorities threaten to take action against residents of the city that don't respect garbage collection regulations.
Our message is that everyone has the responsibility of the rubbish from his own home and must protect it from finding its way into the water. Those who don't abide by the rules will face fines.
For the last 7 weeks, the volunteer team have been camping here to clean waste left behind by residents of Mogadishu. They say solid waste does not only make the beach unattractive, but also threaten marine life. Mohammed Kahir, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
To Nigeria, if you're a dog lover, then this next story will definitely tickle your fancy. Over 215 dogs strutted their stuff on the runway this weekend at the 3rd edition of the Lagos Dog Carnival. The canine extravaganza is growing in popularity, with hundreds lining up to see dogs showcase their various abilities. Here's CGTN's Wanja Mungai with the story.
It was a turn for dogs to show, from statement glasses to cool, fashionable attire, putting their best foot forward at a canine extravaganza in Lagos, Nigeria.
We came to have a lot of fun and participate in the awards show and meet other dogs, so we're enjoying it. We're having a good time.
The festival is an annual event running for the 3rd year now. This time, it attracted 215 dogs of various breeds and 500 dog lovers.
Ever since we started Lagos Dog Carnival, people are taking care of their dogs better because we always have, our motto is no naked dogs allowed. So people are dressing their dogs well, they're grooming their dogs better. And we have more dog people, more dog dads and more dog moms now.
The back-to-school edition was awarding in different categories. It saw some outstanding winners like Canada. The white-haired golden retriever carried the day with the Head Boy Award. The judges rated Canada as the cleanest, most punctual and the noisiest. And for this built and bold German Shepherd, it scooped the Labor Perfect Award. Besides the runway, the creatures also participated in their own Squid Game. Mimicking the famous Netflix show, they were tested on the ability to take instructions like stop and move. King Odozi's pet won this category of the competition.
I was surprised that I was able to command the stop and move. And with this now, it actually encouraged me, and I want to encourage my dog to do more training and practicing.
The dog's fever could be spreading further afield beyond Lagos, as organizers hope to take it to other Nigerian cities. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
Your sports news coming up next. In sports, the Africa Handball Championships set to be held in Morocco are postponed.